Hello again, everybody. I am so excited to be your host once again for this presentation. If you're just joining us now, my name is Annie Ulliac. I'm a soccer player and coach from Edmonton. And this next presentation is actually really near and dear to my heart because I am researching this topic in university right now. So I can't wait to hear everything our next presenter has to say about this. I'm so happy to introduce Amy Harrison as our next presenter. She's originally from Winnipeg, Manitoba. She captained both Canada at the first ever U17 Women's World Cup in 2009, as well as captaining her team at the University of Tennessee. Amy Harrison played for Glasgow Rangers Football Club and Heart of Midlothian Football Club in Scotland. She transitioned to a full-time coach in 2015 in Winnipeg, working with the Manitoba Rex and for Winnipeg South End United as the director of female programs. When she moved to Vancouver in 2019, she became the head coach of the Whitecaps FC Girls Academy and assistant coach of the Girls Elite Super Rex and Pre-Girls program. Amy is a member of the Whitecaps FC Safe Sport Committee and is currently taking her Masters of High Performance Coaching at the University of British Columbia. So thank you all again for joining us today. And here is Amy Harrison presenting on Where Are All the Women? An analysis of the underrepresentation of women in coaching.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Annie. I really appreciate it. So my presentation today is really looking at the structural and cultural barriers, explaining the underrepresentation of female coaches. So what we'll cover today, I'm going to first go into what my personal interest is and why I'm presenting on this topic. I'm going to go into the facts, hard-hitting facts about why this is important. I'm then going to go into the research, themes that I saw across all my research from back in 1970 to present day. Then I'm going to look at strategies, actual tangible strategies that we as organizations, we as coaches, we as people in positions of power can actually implement in our organizations. And then I'm going to share a couple of resources that are actually free that people can access. And then we'll have open questions that Annie will help me with. All right, so my personal interest, keeping girls in sport. Now, the number of girls in soccer in Canada is rising, but the numbers are still a struggle at the older ages. And the numbers that go in at the younger ages, they're still not good enough in comparison to the boys. And as you get older, we lose those girls. And you see the older age groups have less teams, less representation on the female side. That's a passion of mine because of how important the sport of soccer was to me. I know that the role of the coach is crucial in a life, in a child's life, in a player's life. And I know that having women as coaches, which I'll go into in this presentation, is even more impactful. Role models. So just as you see in this picture, and just as us young girls growing up to be soccer players, it's important for us to see our role models playing the game on TV. It's also important for us to see young girls to see women coaching the game. And that really, I'll touch on it again later in the presentation on why that's important. But that's one of the big pieces of my personal interest. The lack of representation of women in coaching really challenges the ability of women to be able to resist negative stereotypes. And it also, it really makes it a struggle to be able to advocate for change when we don't have women in positions of power. So there's lots of common trends, and what I'm seeing personally, and again, this is actually a research-based presentation, but personally, I'm seeing a lot of women quit the game. I'm seeing a lot of women in coaching change careers, and I want to change that. I want to be somebody that can help keep women in the game and see those positives and create a good environment for them. Last thing is conversations I've had, and it's not just with males in positions of power, it's also with females. And the quote I'll say that I've heard so often is, where are the women? There were no women to hire. There were no coaches that are female. And that's difficult to hear because I don't believe it. It might be the case in certain areas, but there's reasons why. And it's not just individual reasons, it's actual structural reasons. And it dates back to gendered stereotypes and everything that I'll get into as well. So the hard-hitting facts. 13.36 million girls are playing the game right now worldwide, which is amazing. It's brilliant. But there's only 7,949 women coaches out of 30,234 in Canada. And in my perspective, that's not good enough. That's not high enough. It's not a high enough percentage. And if you actually look across the world, it's so much smaller. So I will say, yeah, Canada is doing some really good things, 100%. It's just still not there. And what can we do to change that? I'm going to share a little bit about Title IX, and I understand we're in Canada, but Title IX really paints a good picture of this underrepresentation. So Title IX actually, the purpose of it and what it states, the law is that no person in the U.S. shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity that receives federal assistance. So Title IX was implemented in 1972 in the United States. Its purpose was to increase participation of women athletes in the game in high school and college, not just soccer, all sports. So in 1972, there was 16,000 women athletes in high school and college, so NCAA, all that. Now there's 180,000. Amazing. That is what they wanted to happen. Great. Massive impact. But the problem is that there was a massive consequence to this, to women in coaching. And I'll explain why a little bit in the themes that I saw. But it went from 90,000 coaches, female coaches in high school and college in the United States, to 42%. And that is a huge decline, There's a lot of reasons for this, and I'll explain a little bit later. That just kind of paints the picture of how underrepresented we are in the game as women. So in 1985, this article is really, it's great because Acosta and Carpenter, they actually asked men and women what they perceived as the decline in women coaches in college. And they looked at it. It was back in 1985. So this was right after the implementation of Title IX, just only a few years later. So as you can see here, females from first to fourth, they rated success of the old boys club as first, weakness of the old girls club, unconscious discrimination, and then lack of qualified women coaches. So lack of qualified women coaches was fourth. Then when you look at men, the first was lack of qualified women coaches, unwillingness of women to recruit and travel, failure of women to apply for job openings, and time constraints due to family duties. And this really shows that perceptions are huge within this. And women perceive things so much differently than men in the game. So the research. So what I looked at was research back from 1970 to present day. In 1970, that research was very quantitative. So it was all questionnaires. As it went into the 1980s and present day, they started looking at the actual qualitative information. So they started researching and using actual personal interviews with women that have made it, women that are at the highest level of coaching. That is important because what was their experience? What learnings did they take away? But they also provided research on athletes and their perceptions of coaching as a potential career. And that's just as important. This research showed different frameworks and models. I'm going to share one framework today, just due to time, that actually shapes the rest of my presentation. But it's important to note some limitations. Within this research, there's a limited number of sports and levels. So it's either grassroots or it's high performance. It's not covering a whole span. There's not tons of research on it. It's self-reported measures back in 1970 with the questionnaires where they asked athletes who were 30 years old, who was coaching you when you were 5? So looking back on their entire career, that's very difficult to recall. And so that's a major limitation. And then most importantly, there's a lack of diversity. It is research on white males and white females, and that is not good enough, and we need more research, and it needs to be more diverse. So the research I'm going to share today, that's just something we need to keep in mind, that the research we found and the research that's out there is limited. So the ecological systems theory, so this was developed by Lavoie and Titov in 2012. There are 4 levels within it. So this was actually based off of Brofenheimer's EST model on complex dynamic systems. So this here, you can see there's barriers and supports. Barriers are the gray, supports are the white. There's also ones that are supports and barriers. So the 4 levels here are individual, interpersonal, organizational, and then socio-cultural context. This model removes blame of the individual, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end with strategies. It's very important when it comes to underrepresentation of women in coaching. It also shows coaching as a social process, highlighting the proximal and distal barriers within it. So individual here, you can see, I won't highlight all the different types of supports and barriers because you can see it on the screen here, but within the individual, there's personal, biological, psychological. It also goes into emotions and values. Whereas as you go up, it goes interpersonal, where it's social related, relational influences such as your coworkers, your family, your friends, and the impact that has on your career and your career choices. Organizational, so that's the policies, the opportunities or lack thereof. And then when you get to the highest level, social cultural, that's where the norms are. That's where the cultural systems are, and that's where the hardest place to change. So within this model, it's important because there's a lot of uses for it. It's a starting point. So for women, it allows us to analyze our journey. So it allows us to look at what assumptions have been made, what norms are there, what is the social structure. It also helps to really guide decision makers in making changes in new policies and programs. It can, again, refrains from blaming women for the underrepresentation, which is huge. And then it also shuts down myths, which I talked about before, about that there are no women, that it shuts those down right away. And it can really affect change at all levels. So it goes from structural to social, and it identifies gaps. So not just in this model, there's plenty of key themes across all the research from 1970 to present day, and I've condensed them all. Okay, so there's about 11 in here. The first being role models, and I touched on it before, but when we have male leaders and coaches, there's a masculine notion of what leadership should look like. So these gendered social processes reproduce these stereotypes and assumptions regarding leadership. So, for example, when you see men coaches, you think men are better leaders. Women don't have the qualities to lead. And it's more difficult to really attract those female coaches. So when you're thinking about the young women, young girls playing the game, when they see male coaches, they don't think a woman can lead the team. They don't think a woman has have the qualities to be able to coach. And that belief in coaching as a career option just it's not validated. Okay. The second is double bind. So there's a very fine line between conforming to feminine expectations and really leading into lower level roles. So we risk being too strong, too direct, too bitchy. I'll use that term. So there's that fine line. Are we feminine or are we masculine? And that's where the double bind comes into play. So it's masculine and feminine characteristics that we must hold. So we get the disapproval for male assertiveness, but we also get disapproval for being too supportive, being too emotional. That's a major gender role stereotype. Preference. So with these gendered stereotypes and gendered assumptions, female athletes actually apply a gender bias. So when female athletes are coached by male coaches, they actually believe that males are the only ones with those mannerisms that can coach them, that have the ability to coach them. So they feel as though they're more knowledgeable on the game. This is what research is showing. And so women are more nurturing and emotional, but these aren't highly valued characteristics and traits of coaches. And it actually research has showed that 8 out of 12 athletes prefer male coaches. The next is the glass cliff. So the glass cliff is really women are judged and blamed for not being credible coaches when situational factors are ignored. So women actually have to work harder than men due to these cultural perceptions. Women recall feeling judged by gender assumptions and expectations, and women often really feel they have to prove to be able to gain that acceptance and respect from male colleagues. If women do stay in the game long enough, that's when the acceptance and the male superiority disappears because they've proven themselves, but that's if they get there. Self-efficacy, so this is also self-confidence. In 2014, Norman did research, and it actually looked at women, and they self-select themselves out of working towards senior roles because it's a lack of confidence. And again, that's where the support networks come into play, which I'll talk about in a second. Supportive environment. So this is extremely influential. Coaching is not a positive environment for underrepresented groups. They face the feeling, women face and underrepresented groups in general face the feeling of being bullied, excluded, overlooked. We also risk gender discrimination, sexual harassment, wage inequalities. And when we look at it, it's a toxic environment, and women must feel valued. That is what we're looking for in environments, and that's just a cultural thing as well. Homologous reproduction. So it's who you know. So if males are in position of power, they hire what they look like. So there's biases and gender-based exclusion that occur with informal mentoring and recruitment patterns, which favor the known versus the unknown. And so if there's males in positions of power, they likely hire those that look similar to them. Opportunities doubled. This is very straightforward. There is a male game and there's a female game. And females, there are 3% of women coaching in male sports in the United States. That research is in the United States. The chance of women coaching in the male game is so low. But the chance of men coaching in the female game is, they have the same chance as them coaching in the male game. So when you look at it, it's doubled opportunities for men. They have the opportunity to coach in the male and the female game, whereas women, we really just have the female game. If we're not getting jobs in the female game, we're not getting jobs. And so we're not getting those opportunities. Qualifications and experience. In 2016, Kane looked at this, and it actually showed that women are often more qualified in terms of coaching qualifications and degrees. And so that's something to really consider. Time demands. This is a major debate because a lot of times what's said is that the time demands for coaching is too much for a woman, but we get it. There is the same time demands on a woman as a male in the game. But when you look at cultural expectations and you think about it, if you go and coach a session and everyone gets together for a beer, culturally, women are expected to go take care of their children, if they do have children, if they have families. So they don't get into that old boys club. They don't have the opportunity to be able to stick around and have a beer. Women are actually less likely to live to work. And so when you look at it, it's that balance aspect. There's a preference. There's not a preference of work over life. And so you really have to, as organizations, look at that piece as well. Homophobia. This is a very tough one. And homophobia and heterosexism exists at the highest levels. Some lesbians actually remain in the closet because there's threats to job security, there's fear of discrimination, threats to career advancement, and the list goes on. Women coaches feel the need to have to prove one thing or the other, and then it actually affects them if they are a lesbian. They feel they need to stay in the closet, and it's not a supportive environment in that aspect. The old boys club, I mentioned this before. Women, to feel socially well just in general, we must be integrated and have those positive relationships around us. So the old boys club, when you talk about that, it's men, white males have the power in sport in general. And so when we look at it, women are often left out of these male-dominated networks. And so I'll touch on how to fix that in a few minutes, but it often makes women feel isolated and lonely in the game, and it doesn't really encourage them to stay in it. Okay, so the most important piece is the strategies. How do we implement this? And I'll go through this step by step. And the first thing I want to be noteful of here is, and we need to be careful because yes, there's the 4 levels within the ecological systems theory. When we only focus on individual, again, we talk about that blame. So it blames women and it shifts the focus away from real issues. I'm not saying we shouldn't do anything in the individual level. There's tons of things we can do, but we also have to look at the bigger levels. If we only look at the individual, it's short-term change. And it oppresses the minority group. It continues to oppress that minority group. So individual. So here's a few really just simple, well, not simple, but different examples that organizations can use to be able to affect change at the individual level. So we look at it. So increase education and skills. This event, that's fantastic. It's educating individuals, coaches, organizations, people in positions of power. Knowledge sharing and reflection. Open conversations. Coaching is a viable career option. Advocating for women, so organizations continually pushing this, trying to get more women in the game, trying to get more athletes to become coaches. And we talked about how that could happen. More women in coaching positions, it shows young athletes that they can be coaches, that it is a viable career option. Advocate for equal media coverage. Again, it flows from the coaches to the athletes. And what's amazing is we're seeing more and more of it. I get it. Like North America, the NWSL, the finals on, I think right now it might be finishing. But it's important to be able to have access to that. But it's very hard to get access to the European leagues. It's very hard to be able to see that. And we get more media coverage. For example, Chelsea women. I mean, Emma Hayes, she's done unbelievable things, but if we don't see those games on TV, how can we see her coaching? How can we see that as a viable career option? It's very important. Suggest women for job opportunities, push each other through. So it's that role models and support network, Old Boys Club, men pushing women into positions, men really advocating for women. That's huge. And then ethic of self-care to support work-life balance. That, again, when we talked about feeling socially well and cultural expectations on women, I'm not saying they should be doing less. I'm just saying, can we put those supports in to be able to get them through it and be able to have that balance that everyone is looking for? So as we look here, this is the interpersonal. So communicate about professional and personal development opportunities, offer women-led events, this event here today, encourage women to apply for men's teams positions, that support network. So when we talk about the support network, can organizations start creating the new girls club, the old girls club? Can we have those go for beer type situations with all the girls and also maybe just everyone? It doesn't need to be just women, but can we open up the old boys club to everybody, create an inclusive and safe environment? Mentorship. So I'll go into that here. Mentorship was one of the major pieces. So across all themes, mentorship always came up. And there's two different kinds. So formal, informal. Formal is where it's planned. For example, Rian Wilkinson, actually, I was so lucky enough to have Rian as my mentor. And that was technically formal because it was through my master's degree. I had the opportunity to reach out to her and get that mentorship through her. But there also is informal. So this is my boss, Chris Sargent. He's one of my mentors, and that's informal for me because I'm around him every day and he provides that mentorship to me and that support. Mentorship, it supports women's career selection, advancement, satisfaction, productivity. The list goes on and it's endless. There's so much support and guidance there. A couple of things it's really important. Yeah, there's an opportunity to grow and advance, but also there's a lot of research that shows that mentorships allow for opportunities of promotion in different roles, higher salaries, greater career satisfaction when you have that support around you and you have people seeing what you can do on the pitch and giving you different career options and sending you jobs, sending you job postings and opportunities and creating that network. That mentorship piece is very, very important. And I know that a lot of organizations in Canada have started doing it, and it's very exciting to see. So organizational. So within this, this is where you look at the policies, procedures that can be revised. So here, for example, offer professional development on gender equity, inclusion, and sexism. Offer gender bias and awareness training, adopt a practice of interviewing at least one woman for every job. And I'll just be blunt, that's not hard. I know for a fact there is one woman that applies for probably every job. Just interview them, see what they have. The creation of scholarships, which is really big. And there's a ton of organizations, a lot of provincial associations that are doing this. And it's fantastic. I was one of them. There was a lot of grants and things that helped me through it. And a lot of provincial organizations and clubs that have, and even my club right now, that are supporting me financially to be able to get those coaching certifications. That's really important. Policies that support work-life balance. We talked a little bit about it before. There's actually research that says even if you look at the highest roles in coaching, potentially or position sharing. So you have one role, but you're co-coaches. So you have that extra support in that role. If you need to go and pick the kids up from daycare, you have that ability. And then again, we talked about the workload debate and the fact that yes, women have the same expectations on them than men, but we also have to work harder to prove ourselves. We have to work harder to be able to get into those networks. These are examples of organizations that are doing these things and providing the supports. So where coaches can actually share knowledge. And what's really important is it ensures that women don't feel alone when they look at the experiences with homophobia, sexism, or discrimination. And these organizations have really created that network. And there's even more coming up. This is just only a few of them. So the last is a sociocultural. This just generally, it's challenging the ideologies, it's the narratives, it's the values, the beliefs and stereotypes, the gendered stereotypes. And these here maintain male power and privilege. So can we affect change at this level? And how do we do that? That's really important. So I'll just conclude here with one of my favorite quotes from my research. The very people who are best positioned to bring about significant and lasting change are also those who benefit most from protecting and maintaining the status quo. So women and people in positions of power, we have accepted this. We've accepted what's gone on, but we must start challenging it now. So the strength of power of masculinity in sport coaching is too difficult to bear for many, and we just play the game. We just go along with it. We see how long we can last. And as I said, there's trends. There's women changing their career. There's women dropping out of coaching. There's women just changing their career altogether into something different. So how can we create that change? We can't just bear it anymore. We have to try and challenge it. If it continues, we don't really have the ability to affect and alter the sport culture. And it's a struggle to be able to change the attitudes of those in power. So we really need to look at the fact that if we can get that equal participation of women in sport, we can positively influence these outdated stereotypes about women, our capabilities, our capacities within the game. There are people in these positions of power that have proven that they can do it, and it should happen now at all levels. And how many more can we get in? So we really got to look at these collective and collaborative approaches to be able to create social change. And I'd just like to say, this is the research, and I understand there are organizations working towards it. It's brilliant to see, and there's a lot of change happening. And how broad can we look at it, and how much can we look at it away from just the individual saying we just need to educate? Well, we're educated, and there's a lot of women that are coming from playing and have amazing coaching or amazing playing careers that can be fantastic coaches. So now, how do we develop them and really encourage them to want to have a career in the game and continue in the game? And that's that's the research.
That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thanks, Annie.
We do have a few great questions that have come in.
Awesome.
So our first one is, as a male coach who has shared responsibility with a female coach, training female players, how would you recommend that I can inspire these 14-year-olds, early sort of adolescent girls, to consider greater engagement in female development in sport while still keeping it fun and positive?
Oh man, that's a fantastic question. And so Annie, can I just get clarification? This gentleman has a female co-coach as well?
Yes, he has a female co-coach and they're coaching a girls team.
Okay, brilliant. So I think the first thing is amazing. That's having a female co-coach with you. If they are less experienced as a coach, that's bring them in the game. So you've done the first thing. You've ticked that first box, which is great. I think what's really key and what's really important is giving them now the opportunity to lead. So you've provided the guidance to that coach. So now to inspire these young girls to love the game and create that change, have this woman coach lead more, do more. And that kind of shift of power, I wouldn't say like giving it away, but allowing her to have more of a leadership role in that coaching position will then inspire those around.
Okay. And as a follow-up to that first question as well, for the players themselves, I know we talked a lot about the individual level, sort of removing the emphasis on that, which is something that's super important. But I've had this too, just like this coach is saying, where you want to encourage your younger players to do things like watch the NWSL finalists today, watch the other games that are going on, consider going into coaching or refereeing or participating in other parts of the games. But sometimes there's a difficulty sort of presenting that to them without making it seem mandatory or like homework. So is there a way to do that while keeping it sort of lighter?
You know what? That's a fantastic question. And we do struggle with that. And the first thing I'd like to note is that it's a cultural thing in Canada. So women, girls, we don't grow up watching the game. And this is a generalization. I understand there are some girls that do. And oftentimes it's because they have a parent or a cousin that is like very in the game. They play professionally. They did play professionally. They coached, which is great. But the generalization is that culturally in Canada, girls do not grow up watching the game. And so it's not instilled in them to do so. We're not out in the streets playing soccer. We are out in the streets playing street hockey. So there's a difference, and that cultural piece is a really big influence. And so when we look at that, how can we get them to watch? And I'll just share one tangible potential idea we used in our program here is we gave every one of our players a team to watch in the EPL. And if I was going to change it, it would be the women's league. But we did the EPL because there's easier access to watch those games right now, unfortunately. But as we did that, then they had somebody to follow, and we always had conversations. So every week we'd talk about the games. Oh, what'd you think? Who's your favorite player? And you just start growing that culture of watching the game and supporting someone. And that's one piece. The other piece I would say is, can you get them to, is there any way to film your games? And that may not be for the youngest ages, but when we film the games and get them to watch themselves back and challenge them with questions and challenge them with, what could you have done here? And actually have those individual meetings with players and get them to invest in their own development. That's just another way potentially for them to watch it more often.
Wow, that's amazing. And I love that suggestion of following a team, because it is so hard if you're not already having grown up, like you said, in that environment. So hard to get invested when so much of the fun is cheering for your team, supporting your favorite players. So I love that. That's such a great way to introduce it to the girls without making it artificial.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. Okay, we have another excellent question here. As a female coach in a competitive environment yourself, what has been your experience as you moved along in your coaching career? And there's a few parts that go with this, if you'd like to answer them. Did you have a mentor coach? And if so, who? Did you feel supported? Did you feel you were treated differently because you were a female coach? And if so, how did you respond?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good one. And I probably should have thought about this before going into it. I didn't really, but so mentors. I spoke about Rian Wilkinson. That one was a little bit more recent, building that relationship with her. She's now with England full women's national team, was the youth national team coach here in Canada. Not everyone has access to someone in those positions. So when I look at it, some of the most influential people in my coaching career were some of my coaches. So Rob Gale, who's now the head coach of Valor FC, was a huge influence and continues to be as I transitioned into a coach and continue now in the role I am and as I move forward. And there's plenty other ones. My boss back in Winnipeg, Hayden Sloan Seal. Again, these are males. But then as you go here, I have Chris Sargent, and I have a lot of other, even my staff, my support staff that I have. I'd say they're my mentors, because constantly they tell me different things that they believe should change. It's kind of that like two-way street. So there's a lot of influential people along the way. And I really do believe it. How can you continue to create and build that network around you and just continue having those conversations, even though you might be miles away from them. But in terms of my experience, I think when I first started, I'll just say super naive to any of it. I didn't feel like there was anything going on, or that I was just another coach. And I think going from a playing career to a coaching career allows for, I'll just say, you get an extra step ahead of potentially those women that don't have a playing career behind them. And I don't necessarily believe that's fair. I feel as though there are women that know the game better than me that haven't played at levels that I have. And I think that that's a stereotype as well, and that we need to create that inclusive environment for anybody, no matter what kind of playing career we have. So when I look at it, there definitely were challenges along the way, and there still are. I think some being, some mostly, I would say, opportunity. I think there are more opportunities for women as we go year to year in Canada, and hopefully when we get a professional league, we'll have even more opportunities. 5 years, I'll give it 5 years down the road from now. But with that, the opportunity is tough. So I'm from Winnipeg, and yeah, there's opportunity there, but it's not a huge soccer community. So with that, you almost have to move somewhere to be able to go potentially to a bigger number of players that you're working with, and you might have to even move to another country to be in a higher league, because we don't have a professional league. So that's a difficult one for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I'll go to this question now because it relates to we're getting so many amazing questions now, but this relates to your experience internationally, your playing experience, which you just touched on. So having played in Canada, Europe, and the United States, which region does the best and worst job of advancing women in coaching? Or you could also take that as what are the strengths and weaknesses of the different regions in this area?
Yeah, Canada, we're doing it. Like we're doing big things here. And I would have to say there's a big push, and it's great. So I'll put us at the top of the list. But I think one of the biggest struggles, if I look back, I played over 5-6 years ago when I was in Scotland. I transitioned from a major NCAA Division I school that had endless supply of money. And when I went there to Scotland, where the league was semi-pro, it was an amateur league at the time. I was playing for one of the major Scottish clubs, but I had one set of kit. We went to a weight room that was the size of the room I'm in right now. And I actually had to wait till everybody was done to be able to lift, because I needed more weights to go on the bar. So when you look at it now, Scotland, there are 5 pro teams, fully pro teams in the league that I was playing in. You see Erin Cuthbert, who I played with, is now at Chelsea, about to be in the Champions League final tomorrow. That she is a Scottish player that now they were in the World Cup and did very well there, and it grew the game substantially. So that's starting to happen, and I'm seeing a lot of players that I played with that are going into coaching there. But when you think about it culturally, like women didn't play the game there for a very long time. We were not respected there, whereas now it's totally different, and that's only 5 years ago. So there's so much hope there as well. And I think when I look at the States, the numbers show it with Title IX. So yeah, they're low. Is it getting better? I think so. You see women in coaching positions in the NFL. You see women in coaching positions in the men's leagues, which is fantastic. So it's starting to change, and there's starting to be more coaches. And I know that there's more and more women in high positions in the NCAA Division I. I can't speak on the other divisions, but change is happening. So I don't know that I can rate it, but I would say like Canada, in terms of support for it, seems like we really do have those programs and organizational change happening at all different levels, which is exciting.
Great. Comprehensive answer. Thank you for sharing that.
No worries.
So do you have any advice for aspiring female coaches who want to get involved in a competitive coaching environment?
Build your network. We need to feel supported. So, and again, this is a generalization. Maybe you don't need to feel supported, but we do. It's people we need to feel supported, and to feel socially well, you need to have those that support. And again, when you look at the even interpersonal level, you got your family, your friends, your coworkers. If your family doesn't support it, if your friends don't support it, that's a challenge in itself. And so if you build that supportive network around you, not just with your family, friends, but also the other coaches around you, the males, the women, start reaching out to people, build those networks, that will really help as well. If you have those supports to bounce ideas off of, and I'll even say it, to bounce frustrations off of, if you have those people to be able to really let go and challenge what's happening in certain situations, that's a good thing. You need those. So you got to build your network.
Okay, awesome. We are getting so many amazing questions in here, so I'm not trying to rush through them or jump from topic to topic, but it's really interesting to hear your answers for all of these. So our next question is, homophobia is a big problem in society, which reflects into sport, as you've touched on. What are some small, easy steps that we can do from a team or even a club level perspective to start to change this, knowing that there is no magic bullet solution?
Yeah. Okay. So there is a resource. Trying to remember exactly which one. There is a resource out there, and it's actually, I believe, within Cause. And they have a really fantastic resource that shows exactly very tangible things that you can do. One being, like, you print off a piece of paper that says it's a safe place. If you have a piece of paper on your door of your office that says it's a safe place, athletes will feel it's a safe place. If you talk about it openly, if you have those conversations, if you know, and a big one, I'll say, you need to be sure and be careful of your language. So as coaches, we need to make sure we don't ever use any derogatory terms. We are very supportive of everybody and all people, and that language and that potential influence we have on the children that we coach, on the players we coach, is really, really big. So creating a safe place with language we use, with images we use, with role models we use. So for example, I've just created a book club with Abby Wambach's Wolfpack book, which is the young adult edition. And Abby Wambach, she is gay and she's married to a woman that, and she's one of the best American women soccer players in the world, or in the world in general. And so having those pieces within your network and within your team really encourages that safe place.
Yeah, absolutely. The intentionality of language is super, super important at all levels.
Yeah.
So our next question is, if only 1/3 of coaches in Canada are female, is there commitment from the national organization to fast track female coaches to become accredited in a shorter period of time?
That's a difficult question. I don't know exactly what the national organization is doing specifically for that. I know that there are now 6 women on my national A license in comparison to potentially 0 or 1 in past courses. So they are open to it. I struggle with the term fast tracked because we shouldn't be fast tracked. We should do everything we need to do and be able to gain all the education and experiences that males do, because it's just as important. I don't feel that fast tracking will help. I think it will only hinder us, because when you think about it, again, we looked at women being put in positions of power. If we're not ready for that, it's a bad look and it hurts us. So they need to be ready for it, need to be supported in those positions. And so we just need to be careful with how we get women into those positions, and it will not happen immediately. That's really key. And there needs to be change at all the levels to be able to slowly grow the number of women in coaching.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's the last of our questions. Personally, I absolutely loved your presentation, loved hearing you talk on this subject. It is such an important subject. This book right here. Oh, I don't think anyone can see your screen.
Yeah, I know. I was just going to share that, Annie. Do you mind if I just say it?
Absolutely.
So, sorry, I meant to highlight 2 resources. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So The Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sport, that website has unbelievable resources, and they're all free. So go on there if you're interested in any of that stuff. There's a lot about equality, everything to do with women in coaching and minority groups, everything like that. And then Lavoie, which was actually on some of the research I stated earlier, and the EST model. So with Nicole Lavoie, this book, I read the entire thing for my study, and there are tons of research actually on and actual stories from women across the globe, which is really important as well. So just two resources I would recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing those. I think that everybody should read that book if they're interested in learning more about it. Really lays out all of the studies, all of the latest research on women in coaching, and has lots of great recommendations at all the levels. Thank you again. Thank you so much for your time today, for your knowledge, for sharing it with everybody here today. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Annie, and thank you for putting on this event and for Scottish United. It's a fantastic one with unbelievable presenters, and looking forward to the rest of the topics, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.